Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of our /ProRevenge. In today's episode, my cousin stole loads of jewelry, so I stole his inheritance. Entitled mother tells my mom to handle her kids. You better pay for my son's phone. Sure thing, I'll send you a bill. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. My cousin stole loads of jewelry, so I stole his inheritance. I do not speak lawyer, so please forgive me. Backstory. 25 years ago, my aunt passed away when I was a baby, leaving my two cousins who were both in their early 20s alone to fend for themselves. My grandparents, who were very wealthy, put a clause in their will that grandkids will receive half of their share of inheritance if a parent passes before the children reach age 30, and then the other half when my grandparents eventually passed. Both my cousins received a very sizable inheritance coupled with the money they got from selling my aunt's house. The younger of the two paid off her college loans and was able to buy property. She still lives on the same plot of land. The older sibling blew all of his money. Straight out of a book of the Bible, within 6 years, he was back to living in a condo working as a police officer. Everyone in our small family knew he had a substance issue, so he was barely making ends meet with his officer's salary and buying copious amounts of drugs. The next 4 years, my cousin went to rehab 3 times, sponsored by my grandparents. He sobered up after getting his girlfriend, now wife, pregnant. Absolutely wretched woman. She saw my grandparents as payday and essentially baby-trapped my cousin, thinking it was her ticket. Within 7 years they had 3 kids, so she is locked in tight. She's a nurse, and with 3 kids around they always needed a little boost. Guess who they would always ask? You got it, my grandparents. Being the kind spirits they are, they always lended a hand. My father, mother, sister, and I got sick of it very quickly. My grandmother unfortunately passed away when I was 17, leaving my grandpa as the last remaining. I was undoubtedly my grandfather's favorite among the grandkids, which left a real sore spot in the mouth of my cousin and his wife. I had 2 more years at home before college, so I lived with my grandpa to keep him company and help take care of him. My cousin and his wife hated this, so much so that whenever they came to visit and I was not home, they would send their 3 gremlins into my room to destroy it. My room had double doors, so it couldn't be locked. This was the start. The longer I lived there, the more they would mess with me. My cousin even went as far to place one of those little mechanical noisemakers in the cabinet in my room, the ones that play sounds at random intervals that make you think you're insane. Thankfully, my German Shepherd would always hear it, and after a week or so she finally found it. They did this to distance me and deter me from taking care of Grandpa so they could swoop in and be the heroes. This continued until one of the kids found my gun. By this time I was 18 and in the possession of a firearm. I use quotations because my grandfather has guns, but cannot aim and shoot them anymore due to arthritis and nerve degeneration, so when I moved in, he placed all the weapons in my hands should the need of self-defense arise. But should he see them out for any reason other than cleaning, there would be hell to raise. Being very well trained with guns and having a sense of pride in defending my home, I took this responsibility very seriously. I always kept a handgun in a locked container in my nightstand with the key on a high shelf out of reach from the gremlins. One fateful day, I am out getting my grandfather food when I come home and my older cousin, his wife, and my grandfather are staring at a gun on the table. It was my gun that I kept in the lockbox. It was loaded and had a bullet chambered. I always keep a magazine in the lockbox but never loaded into the gun. The lockbox was nowhere to be seen. My cousin claimed one of the children found the gun and was playing with it. I was 100% certain that he either found the key or broke the lockbox open to get to it and load it, as a 6-year-old would not be able to reach a key I could barely grab, figure out what it was to load my gun and chamber it. I tried my best to explain what my cousin had said was bullshit and that I never keep my firearms loaded in the house, but my cousin, who was a cop, scolded me on gun safety and threatened to have me arrested if I didn't leave and hadn't arrested me yet because we're family. I was asked to collect my belongings and go back to my parents. My cousin had one, or so he thought. The next day I apologized to Grandpa and explained to him there was no way one of the kids could have gotten the key. He agreed with me and he apologized, but he thought it best I move out until things cool down, but once they do I would be welcome back home. Our relationship was a little fractured due to disinformation provided by my cousin. A month later, my grandfather died of a heart attack at 86. I was devastated. I was just beginning to get back into rhythm with him and rebuilding the trust that was somewhat shattered. To this day, I am still unsure of what kind of man he saw me as due to my cousin. Immediately, my cousin and his wife began sucking up to my dad, as they had sealed payday with Grandpa. It was time to move on to the uncle. This persisted for a month or two. I wouldn't stand for it. Then came time for the will. My grandfather's lawyer read out the will to me, my father, mother and sister in our home. Our two cousins would be briefed individually on their share of the estate, per my grandparents' requests. Then, the miracle line in the will comes to fruition. If anyone attempts to claim any part of the estate that is not assigned to them, they forfeit any assets they are supposed to receive and will be divided equally among the remaining family members. This was basically their way of saying if you try to claim more than you're given, you get nothing. My father is supposed to receive every piece of physical property, aside from 2 or 3 items he set aside for me, from my grandparents as he is the only remaining child. The revenge. I hatched my plan. I called my cousin and told him all of Grandma's jewelry was to be donated to a charity auction. Grandma's collection of gems and metals was extensive to say the least, so a charity event wouldn't care if a few pieces didn't make it right. It was a lure of gargantuan proportions that my greedy bastard of a cousin could not resist. He bit right on it and headed over to my grandparents' house ASAP, determined to snatch up as much as he could. A handful would send his kids to college. Regardless of what I said, the jewelry was never going to go to him anyways, so his actions were purely his own since none of it was destined to be his. Coincidentally, Dad was on his way with the lawyer to my grandparents' house to overlook everything, formality stuff. According to my dad's testimony, my cousin had 3 shoeboxes worth of Grandma and Grandpa's jewelry piled on the kitchen counter ready for loading into his car. My dad and the lawyer stood in the kitchen wondering why it was all there when my cousin walks in from my grandparents' bedroom with a 4th and final shoebox. The jig was up and he put 2 and 2 together that I set him up. Which was true. But there was no penalty against me for exploiting my cousin's greed, so he would *CK himself over. It's worth noting that between the 18 years from my aunt's death and my grandpa's death, their wealth had increased several times over, so my cousin felt cheated and expected to receive just as much as my sister and I, despite receiving half of his already and blowing it. Throughout this whole ordeal, his younger sister, my other cousin, has not had a problem at all and is still weeping over Grandpa's death like the rest of us. However, just like that, my cousin lost enough money in the course of 30 minutes that made him contemplate his sanity. Over greed. My cousin's *TCH of a wife apparently filed for divorce a few weeks later. We haven't heard from him in nearly 6 years as he is all but disgraced now. You can call this a fairy tale ending, and on this particular part of the story it somewhat is. There was a massive lawsuit by an unknown family member involving the IRS and FBI later on, but honestly I would rather have my grandparents. Leave comments if you want the other part of the story, but it's not really a revenge story. Imagining your cousin walking into the kitchen with that box of jewelry and seeing everyone standing there makes me smile so much. I'm sorry you weren't able to live with your grandfather in his last moments, but it sounds like he knew what was going on. You're lucky to have had such a close relationship with him. That, and I love the thought that if he wasn't so greedy, he could have gotten out of there with a shoebox or 2 full of jewelry before anyone ever arrived. Still a hefty payday and they would have kept their inheritance. But he just had to keep going back for more and more until he got caught. Wow. What an greedy a holy your cousin is. Would love to hear the other part. Hook, line and sinker. And your cousin was not a wee bit suspicious after all the shit he pulled with you. Either he is as dumb as a bag of bricks, no offense to the bag of bricks intended, he underestimated you by a huge margin, overestimated himself by a huge margin, or all of the above. Something Dunning-Kruger. When my father dies, his current wife and my half-sisters will most likely attempt to cut me out of the will. I don't want my father's wealth, I want him. They already have him mostly convinced in a bad person, so I see it coming. I feel this post in my bones. I'm so sorry for the loss of your grandparents. It breaks my heart to see family members destroy their relationship with their loved ones over greed. I appreciated what you said, that more than anything you wish your grandparents were still there. I'm sure your grandfather is smiling down on your brilliance. Entitled mother tells my mom to handle her kids. My 17F mom, 41F, took me out to get makeup the other day, for a friend whose birthday is coming up. We entered the store and all was going really well. I was checking out concealers while my mom was on the other side of the shop looking through various shades of lipsticks. Enter entitled mother, late 20s, F, with her devil spawn. I say devil spawn because her kids were misbehaving wildly, and she didn't bother even once to tell them to stop or something. Not even a minor rebuke. I say devil spawn because that about sums these two kids up. They were running wild around the shop, throwing testers around and being a general nuisance. My mom stepped in when the kids started poking their slimy little fingers into the lipstick testers. I get it, they're just testers, but EW. People are likely going to use those to decide whether they like the shade or not, and God knows where those fingers have been. Like, one of them was legitimately picking his nose minutes ago. My mom, having 4 kids of her own, looked around to find their parent. EM was the only one in the shop besides us. My mom called out to her, and this is how the conversation went. Mom, excuse me, are these kids yours? I know, very obvious, but my mom is a very polite person, so it's not odd to me. EM, yeah. Mom, can you please tell them to stop touching the testers? They're not toys. EM, if it's such a problem, why don't you handle them? Oh, boy. My mom left the shop for a few minutes and signaled me to not follow her. She came back with 2 buff security guards in tow. The kids were still poking their fingers in the testers. The guards walked up to the kids, and in the deepest baritone ever, one asked, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" The kids looked terrified and cue the waterworks. EM immediately stormed over and began reprimanding the guards for scaring her poor little angels. She then saw my mom nearby. EM, you did this. At this point she was practically hissing like a cat, "How dare you teach me how to parent?" Mom, in an eerie monotone, "You told me to handle them, hence I handled them." She screamed more obscenities at my mom, the guards, anything around really, but the guards weren't having it and told her to leave. She created quite a scene, but thank everything that is holy, she left. My mom had quite the story to tell at dinner. A rather comedic encounter with an entitled parent. Your mama's gold, and you can tell her I said so. I will. How dare you teach me how to parent? That would imply she actually learned anything. How dare you teach me how to parent? I dare because A, you darn well told me to, and B, because you obviously need it. She's got divine parenting powers and teaching skills, all hail the queen. My son was a devil spawn at the age of 4. He also had undiagnosed issues at the time. I took him nowhere in public. Good for your mom. Someone had to put her in her place. These kids were much older TBH. Like 8 to 10 years old. People expect kids that age to behave. Please tell your mom that I want to be her when I grow up. For sure. You better pay for my son's phone. Sure thing, I'll send you a bill. Today marks the beginning of a new era. An era where a school district stands up for itself and thumbs its nose to the 1%. Today's MC is really a continuation of an original MC from 2 days ago, where a student demanded I let go of their phone, so I let go and let both his phone and a school window get damaged. Originally, administration was letting the parents know that there is no way that they will be paying the parents for a replacement phone in this instance. A security guard and 34 other students witnessed this kid take his phone aggressively out of the teacher's hand and subsequently launch it across the room. It was 100% the student's fault. Administration was willing to drop it and move on, hoping that the family of this student would do the same. That was definitely not the case. The parents of the phone thrower demanded that the teacher, me, Opie, pay for this phone, saying you better pay for my son's phone. This is when admin of my middle school, with district backing, performed the best MC I've seen in a bit. I'm proud to be at my school district today. The district has come to the conclusion, after investigating the incident, getting statements from students/witnesses/me/security, etc., that it was the student's fault that the phone flew in the air. The district agreed, however, to pay for the student's phone, as it was technically in a teacher's possession when it got damaged. It was an iPhone 12, so the check was probably around the area of $800. Then administration did them one better by also sending the parents a bill for the window, to the tune of $1,678. It wasn't a typical window, nor is it easy to replace. Once the teacher let go of the phone, it was in the student's possession, so now it's the student's fault. I'm not sure if this is the argument they made, but I'm presuming this is their justification for it. Doing some quick math, it looks like they're paying $800 something dollars either way. Plus the student is in ISS for destruction of school property. TM, 2 medium, didn't read, a student's parents demand the school district pay to replace a student's phone that he accidentally threw across the classroom. The district issues a check for the phone and a bill for the damage the phone did to the window, plus a destruction of property charge on the kid's school record. They should only be paying the replacement value. On an iPhone 12, depending on the exact model, that's only around $280 to $330. The only confirmed number I have is on the window, thanks to Dave and security's wife working next door at district office. I really want to know how much they have to pay after all is said and done. How rich do you have to be for being sent to the International Space Station to be a punishment? Ha! I never even thought about this usage of the acronym for in-school suspension. In our neck of the woods, it's as somebody snoring? A big no-no in ISS, the kids better be working, and they've learned that if they finish all their work given by teachers, they just end up with more work to do. I'm all for discipline, but sending a minor to the International Space Station for breaking a window seems a little over the top. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.